Hello, my name is Matt Stohrer and I repair saxophones for a living. Today I want to take a quick video to show you a particular problem about adjustments for older saxophones. This particular example is a Selmer Mark 6 in the 85,000 serial number range. And what I want to talk to you about is the adjustment here for the automatic G sharp and the 1-in-1 for the bis. Okay? Now, the problem in particular, now this happens all the time, but in particular today what I want to talk about is when you have the automatic G sharp and bis adjustment arm coming directly off of the key cup on your F sharp. Okay, so here's your F, here's your F sharp, and you can see when I depress the F sharp, this arm here presses down on the G sharp and also presses down on the bis arm, and that is how you get your 1-in-1 fingering, right? So if you're playing your B flat with your 1-in-1, that is the adjustment that's being used to close your bis. Also, when you play G sharp and it's attached on a modern pinky spatula where anything depresses the G sharp, to have that held shut when you have anything in the right hand stack held down is dependent upon this G sharp adjustment. Now, the places that you're normally going to have issues here, and the reasons you're normally going to have issues are a few. The G sharp key needs to be completely tight around the rod and completely tight between the posts. This needs to be fit exactly. The reason being that it's held closed on this side here by the G sharp normally, and if you lift that up, the spring also is mounted on this side of the key. So it's applying pressure on this side, right? So if this key is not completely tight in here, then it's going to lift up a little bit on this side when being held down on this side. So if you've got this closed, but you open up your G sharp here, then this key is going to move this way and you're going to have a leak on this side. Okay? Now, your first reaction is going to be to tighten this screw, but the problem isn't actually that this isn't tight enough. The problem is that this key is moving. So if you tighten this in order to try and get that to close, you're going to end up holding this key open because this is going to be too tight. So your G sharp needs to be absolutely tight so that it can be held equally well down either on this side or on this side. Second thing, and the same basic concept with your bis has to be fit completely tight. This pivot screw here has to be perfect. It has to fit perfectly into this key. This can't move at all. A lot of times what you'll find is that it might be fine this way, but it'll actually, if you grab the end of it and try and move it, you can see how the sax is moving when I try and move it. If it's not fit perfectly, the pivot screw doesn't actually fit inside the receiver and this will move around a little bit. And what that does is when you depress it up here with the A versus depress it down here, the key is actually going to be moving a little bit either way. So it's not going to be sitting at the same attitude each time. And you're going to have the same exact problem that you had with the G sharp not being fit right. You're going to over tighten this to try and get it to hold it down to make up for the movement down here. But when you're already holding it shut here and you add anything on the right hand stack to close it, this is going to be too tight and it's going to hold your F sharp open and it's going to hold your entire lower stack open. So you're going to have a leak here in order to get that to play well when it's just the 1-in-1 adjustment by itself. Now, pivot screws, okay, here is a Selmer pivot screw. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Okay, there we go. There is a Selmer pivot screw. That, you can notice that it's shaped. That has to fit exactly perfectly into the rod here. And it has to fit two ways. It has to fit perfectly inside the key, that is, the shape has to be correct, and it has to go in far enough so that while this key is completely free, it's also not moving this way and not moving this way. And the way you achieve that is by counter boring this post so that the screw can go in just a little farther, and using an exact shape reamer. Let's see if I can show this to you. Let's see if that'll focus. Come on, there you go. An exact shaped reamer that you can use to ream out the key to make sure that it mates perfectly with the shape of the pivot screw, which is obviously going to be the same shape. So you get your G sharp perfectly fit, both the rod inside the posts, okay, and then the key on the rod, and then the key between the posts. You get your bis perfectly fit so that your pivot screw fits perfectly inside, and this will be on both sides of the key, perfectly inside the receiver, and then it goes far enough in so that it holds it securely both this way and this way, but it also is completely free, can't have any sluggishness there. And then, after that, you need to make sure that this piece here actually is fit tightly inside this slot. Sometimes that'll be worn down, particularly on a relacquer. And you need to make sure that this screw is really tight. So this can't move at all inside this slot. Also, these screws has to be nice and tight. Sometimes they'll be worn down and they'll actually move a little bit up and down inside their threads here. So you can use thread locker for that if you need to. The stuff I use is, let's see, this stuff, the Loctite Blue. It's removable. It'll do the job. Some guys also use clear nail polish, which will work almost as well. So you've got your G sharp tight completely. You've got your bis tight completely. These screws are tight. Also, your adjustment materials need to be domed. See that there? This is because when you screw it in and out, if they've got edges, the edges can kind of move like this as you screw it in. So you're not going to get an actual smooth increase of the adjustment material. But if you dome it, and the way you do that is by mounting it in your bench motor and then holding a piece of sandpaper against it while you have the bench motor on, and that turns it into a dome. So you dome your adjustment materials so the adjustment that you make is actually even and smooth. And then you need to have this key be completely tight. And that is somewhat complicated to do, but it's basically the technique you use on the G to get the post tight around the rod, to get the key tight around the rod, and then the key tight between the posts. It is complicated though by the fact that, let's see here, the F sharp has two parts that are contacting the rod. Okay, so you can see that there's the back of the F sharp, and then this actuating rod comes back here, and you've got another little piece around the rod here. Now it has to be tight in both places. So you can see I can grab this and try and wiggle it and nothing happens. I can grab this and try and wiggle it, nothing happens. Wiggle it this way, nothing happens. It has to be completely tight here, completely tight here, and that means that the line has to be completely straight from here to here. These posts have to be all in line so that it doesn't bind up, so that your rod goes in straight. So you straighten your rod, and then you put it through the posts, and you move them back and forth until everything is straight and the rod slides right through. You have to make the post tight around the rod, which you can do by using a pair of pliers like this that peens the end of the post so that it's tight around the rod. Then you swedge the key around the rod and you face the hinge tube so that it's nice and flat, has a good bearing surface against the posts. Now the reason you have to have this be completely tight here and here is that when you actuate the F sharp in different places, here's where it gets actuated by the F, here's where it gets actuated by the F sharp, and then by the D. If you actuate it in different places, if it's not completely tight, it's going to move in slightly different ways each time. And then this key isn't going to be sitting flat like it's supposed to. So the way that you'll find a lot of times that people get around making this adjustment perfect here is that they use soft pads, deep seats, and they use mushy adjustment materials, and you end up with a really mushy feel. But if you want to have your horns feel really firm and have a sound like this to your pads, have everything feel really positive and snappy, there is no way to get around having all of these things be perfect in order to have your horn seal. Now, what I described as far as having the keys be nice and tight and with no lost motion, no play, no mechanical slop, your entire horn needs to be like that. But in particular, this is a very good illustration of why it needs to be that way. You've got force traveling long distances, you can see how many different pieces of the horn are moving here, that force needs to be accurately transferred from one place to another with absolutely no lost motion, no play, no movement, no bending of any keys. Otherwise, your pads are not going to seal the way they should. So there you have it. Hope this was helpful. My name is Matt Stohrer. I repair saxophones for a living. Feel free to get in touch, to leave a comment, to ask questions. I love talking saxophone, and I hope you found this helpful.